Everybody, welcome back to Hardpoints, the podcast about energy security and the startup economy, and of course, how they intersect to shape the world around us. A lot of that happening today. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and what it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, how you doing? How was your week?
It was a chaotic week, man. We did the groundbreaking for our pilot site, so I was in Wyoming this week. And it was a bit of a rough go. I'm going to be honest. It was a rough go. The groundbreaking was fine, but my health was not great.
Yeah, tell me about it, man. Do you get a cold or something?
So we've all done this, right? Where like 2 weeks ago, my little guy, my 8-year-old, got sick, vomited, whatever. And then like a week ago, my 11-year-old vomited. And then right before I left on this trip, my wife got sick. And so I was like, oh, maybe I skated out, but not to be. So I actually made it through. We did the groundbreaking on Wednesday, and there's people there. I'm making a speech. I'm doing the whole thing, and then I get these waves. About halfway through the speech, I get these waves of nausea, and like it occurs to me what's happening. And so I make it through the speech, but then very quickly like run out the backside of the tent and start vomiting on the Wyoming prairie, and it was. It was a sight to be seen. I'm not sure how many people actually saw that part of it. But the prairie dogs had a snack on the prairie. Sorry if that was too graphic.
No,
but,
I'm just I'm imagining the horror that must be going on as you're giving this speech. Like, gotta get through it, and then just like barf city.
That's exactly right. In some ways, it's sort of like the pilot days of just compartmentalized, just focused. Like I knew I only had a few minutes left when I got the waves of nausea. It was like, okay, I got about like 8 minutes to go. I can make it. I'm going to get through it. I mean, I had politicians there. I had community members there. And I was just like, hold it together, man.
Was it just like one and done? Like you just like a bad batch of something? Or was it like you were out for the count?
I hate to say it. It was a mix of vomiting and sleep for the next 24 hours. The good news is a 24-hour bug, like they go around, but I like just went back to the hotel and I just spent the next 24 hours in that cycle. That was not awesome either.
That's the worst, man. Like I'm okay with like head colds or even the flu to a certain extent. You just kind of lay low and, try to breathe, man. But when you're running to the bathroom to
oh my God,
to upchuck like that ain't fun.
Well, also here's a dad moment. Like I went 20 years of my life without throwing up, right? From like your mid-teens until when you're a dad, there's no throwing up. Like I didn't vomit, but then I become a dad and these gremlins bring germs into your world again. And of course, like I've got an 11-year-old now. For the last 10, 11 years, I've been vomiting on a fairly regular basis again. But like there was a good chunk of time when I avoided all that crap.
Well, Neal, I'm questioning what you were doing during your 20s because I had a lot of alcohol-induced vomiting at that point. But that's like
totally different thing. So that is also, I hear you. I'm not a puker. I don't know what it is. I have friends that like drink and vomit. I drink too, but I'm not a vomiter when I drink. So I did. I'm telling you, I went at least 20 years without puking.
That's awesome. No, it reminds me a little bit of a story. My mother-in-law got like a gift certificate to the Cheesecake Factory or something, right? And she wanted to take the whole family out. So we all went to the Cheesecake Factory. It's this big one, like downtown Denver, huge, like it's the size of like a Target effectively. And we had little kids at the time. Ellen was just a tiny little kid. And then Luke was, he'd been potty trained, but he wasn't really down with like going to the bathroom in public bathrooms. And so I remember I knew he had to go. I was taking him there. I'm the dad, it's son. So like big public restroom. And I bring him into the stall and he just didn't want anything to do with it. Like he was just like furious and he was fighting me about the whole thing. And he ended up like low crawling with his pants around his ankles underneath the stall door to get away. And I was just like, which is just like the most disgusting, like this public men's room. And the whole family got sick after that. Yeah. Like he brought back some nasty bug off of the floor of that thing, and like everybody got sick the next 2 days.
My God.
And I just like, oh goddamn kid, like you're killing me.
No,
literally, like you almost killed me. So
just no, yes, no. It's like, and they don't understand, right? They have no concept of what a germ is or why that's not okay. I've tried to explain it, but
Uh,
they still don't get it.
Yeah, no, you don't get it, or they don't get it, and then, but it's just funny, like the horror they have of like a men's room, and then like the look roll
Mm,
across the floor under the door. I was like, none of this made
I
sense to
know,
me, dude.
man. No, I try to tell them every time we go into a public restroom, like, hey guys, how about we don't touch anything? Touch as little, like my little guy still when he goes in, the pants go down to the knees and he puts every bit of his body up against the urinal. And you're like, no, how about take like a half-inch step back and aim up a little bit? But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's the fun of having a wiener is you get to aim at things. Actually, it's funny as you were talking about the whole drop in the pants to the floor. So one of the things that we used to do at the Naval Academy, I think they still do, is you had to bet on the football games. And so
huh?
the upperclassmen would bet on against the lowerclassmen that the lowerclassmen always had to bet on Navy. And when I was going to school there, like Navy lost. We one season we went 0 for 11, right? Just a horrific.
Oh,
So like it
yeah.
was
Yeah.
like so the lower so the reward for the lower classmen, the freshmen, was is that they could act like a normal human being, sit at the lunch table without having to like sit square up with their eyes on the boat and all that business. And but one of the favorite ones for a little while there until the school banned it was that the lower classmen, the freshmen, if they lost the bet, they had to pee like a kindergartner for a day. Uh, and so you'd be in these academic buildings in the men's room in there, and like there would be some dude with his pants all the way on the floor, his ass hanging in the breeze.
Oh,
And
solid.
it was pretty funny, but the professors just got tired of seeing man ass all the time. So so that was
That's the parts of the military I miss, man. Like those little things. I mean, that is an awesome. I mean, it's the kind of thing that like you can't do it in the civilian world. There's no equivalent in the civilian world, and it's an inside joke that you and your buddies from the Naval Academy will only you will understand. I love it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. Well, let's talk about some things that maybe are a little bit more serious. The U.S. just bombed Iran this week, and the Pentagon's motto might as well be shoot first, assess later. That's right. B 2 stealth bombers dropped 30,000-pound bunker busters on Iranian nuclear sites this week. The White House, of course, immediately declared mission accomplished because apparently that's something that we still do. But here's the catch. They said it before checking if they'd actually really damaged anything. Some of the early intelligence suggests Iran's nuclear program may have only been delayed a few months. There was a U.S. intelligence brief that was leaked associated with that. So, that's kind of like when you hit snooze on your alarm and pretend that's solved waking up. Experts are already questioning whether this really was the strategic masterstroke the administration's claims that it is, or really just an expensive way to slightly rearrange some uranium. Of course, world markets freaked out a little bit. Oil spiked, and a defense contractor definitely high-fived their accountant. Speaking of the intersection of defense and contracting there, General Christopher Donahue, head of the U.S. Army in Europe, wants to test cutting-edge defense tech in live Ukrainian combat. That's, of course, because the best QA environment really is a battlefield. It's not a terrible idea, but obviously there's some side effects to that. At the same time, enter Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, Palantir's CTO Shyam Sankar, and Kevin Wheel and Bob McGrew, the current chief product officer and the former chief research officer of OpenAI, respectively. These tech officers now have a new title, as they have just been sworn into the U.S. Army Reserve as lieutenant colonels. Yes, a real rank, to help speed up defense tech integration. No word on whether that rank comes with combat boots or just a fancier LinkedIn title like Lieutenant Colonel of Lethal Disruption, U.S. Army and Meta AI Division. Critics worry, of course, about militarizing Silicon Valley. Supporters say it will change defense procurement for the better. But if we can't get them to fix Facebook, maybe they can at least fix the Army. Also on the defense and the tech side of things is with a side of climate is that NATO is not just fighting wars, but also climate change too. So NATO has been under pressure to increase its military spending. And as a result of that, NATO defense budgets are ballooning. But tucked inside of those billions are funds for climate resilience, because climate change is also a national security threat. We obviously talk about that here. which, to be totally fair, it really is. Rising sea equals sinking bases. So think greener bases with renewable energy, more climate-proof supply chains, and a better way to keep tanks cool in a heat wave. One NATO official summed it up pretty succinctly, which is you can't fight wars on a flooded runway. This marks the first time a missile silo might come with a compost bin, of course. And then finally, in breaking news, we're recording this on the 27th of June, is that the Supreme Court has pretty much just said you're all kind of on your own. In a landmark ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court just took a buzzsaw to judicial power. Among the changes were federal courts can no longer issue universal injunctions or nationwide rulings. As part of that, the case that was embedded on that was the idea around birthright citizenship, part of the post-Civil War constitutional amendments that granted at the time freed slaves the unquestioned right to their American citizenship because they were born in the United States. The court essentially said, you want rights, you better be ready to fight for them as individuals, which feels a lot like saying we believe in liberty, just not logistics. Legal analysts are calling this a seismic shift in constitutional law. Regular citizens are wondering about whether they have to sue on their own, and civil rights groups are bracing for a flood of really fragmented cases. So if you thought the American legal system was confusing, buckle up. It's going to go full multiverse. That's the news you need, where tech, climate, constitutional chaos all meet for coffee. Remember, stay informed, stay weird, and if somebody from Meta shows up in camo asking for your location, you might just have to call them sir. Lot going on this week, Neal.
Oh my gosh. Well, first, I'll start with Iran. Shout out to my buddies who fly B-2s. And, I want to start with the execution. I mean, the Secretary of Defense, Trump, all lauded the military. I want to just start with the tactical execution of our professionals in arms doing an amazing job. That really was a more than 24-hour mission that encompassed a lot of different airplanes getting moved around the world. And I don't know, just want to start with the tip of the cap to the tactical execution.
Yeah.
Which is pretty phenomenal. It's for two guys who have done similar missions and maybe fewer, continental leaps. But, it's hard, man. It's hard to get that many pieces moving in the same direction to execute. And it sounds like they did a great job. So hats off to them. More, in terms of the result, I mean, I know that it's the administration's objective to paint this as a massive win. Tactically, it feels like, it probably didn't accomplish that much. I don't know that we really can tell from overhead images. What was really accomplished is going to come out later in the human intelligence and the sort of folks we have on the inside. My bigger question, though, is around what comes next. As a veteran of the Iraq 2003 invasion, we prepared very little for the day after we won. I don't think anybody thought that, Trump made the decision. I don't think he thought about what comes next. Let's just remind ourselves that when we took down Saddam Hussein, we disrupted the balance of power in the Middle East. And what was once kind of a stalemate between Iraq and Iran, the reason Iran is such a power now is because we took Iraq out of the picture. So now what happens? I think also what happened is that Iraq turned into a lawless frontier with many different competing factions, including, it led to the creation of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So what happens now, I guess is the question. Iran has been thrown into a different place. It doesn't look like it's full chaos, that the Ayatollah is still in charge and their economic system is still, sort of barely functioning, but they've lost all their allies, right? Hamas and Hezbollah. And Syria's not really an ally anymore. Russia's too busy. Like, all of their previous allies are gone. I don't think they have any choice but to pursue nukes. So that means that they're now boxed in a corner. They're definitely going to pursue nukes no matter what now, because they don't have any other way to project power or to have any say in what happens. So yeah, they back down now because that's what they have to do. They give Trump the headline now, but they play a much longer game. And in the future, are we really safer? I don't know. As I said last week, this whole non-proliferation thing is just about buying time. I'm not sure that this outcome, where we're not going to have any inspection rights, we're not going to have any ability to really monitor what they're doing underground, leads to a more certain, longer, longer timeline of us being safe.
Yeah, we were talking about this last week, and like, if we're not willing to fully commit, like, what are we doing? Was my thought here.
Yeah.
We didn't fully commit. We just did
Yeah.
a big show. And to your point, like, there's no other organization on the planet Earth other than the U.S. military that could pull off something of this complexity. It's just what happens when you have a multi-decades, effectively century-long commitment to building the world's best military, and properly resourcing it and training and all the things. It's actually kind of like, it's worth sitting and pausing for a second and going, like, what a miracle, of a miracle of death, but a miracle it is that, like, something like this can be pulled off. Like, that's just like, it's incredible. And they make it look routine. Um, but that said, I think it was just an incredibly stupid decision. Like, I don't think it will prevent the Iranians from getting a nuclear weapon. If anything, it only just delayed them, probably. They have zero other outlets for them to advance. The only thing that they could do uh, is build a nuke. Like, that's it. Like, those are the only countries we respect, frankly, are the countries that have nuclear weapons. And so as a result, they got the message super loud, super clear, that that's what they got to do.
Yeah.
Um,
We 100% agree on that. I mean, I think last week I took the position that if you're going to do it, now's kind of the time to do it. I still feel that was sort of the calculus. Is like, Iran's as weak as they're ever going to be. But to your point, in diplomacy, you want to give and this is true in negotiation, in business, or anything. You want to foresee the path out for your counterparty. Give them, box them in where you can, but give them a clear out that is aligned with your interests. And in this case, I don't see what that out is. Their out is going to be, okay, we get it. We understand the game now. We have to have nukes or we're going to get pushed around. I just don't think, given what I know about Iran, which is that they're the heirs of the Persian Empire and they've got a lot of pride that goes along with that perception of themselves, they're not backing down. They may have done a token attack in Al Udeid in Qatar this last go around, but they're thinking long term, man. And I think that a nuclear armed Iran is the worst possible outcome here. I think that's maybe now the most likely outcome.
Yeah, I think that. I also am a little bit worried about, like, this was the first combat use of the GBU-57, which was that bunker buster. And so we gave the people that we would use that weapon against the most clear evidence of its capabilities, right? They now know how capable it is and are going to engineer around that. And so we tipped our cards. That was just conceptual in the public intelligence space as far as, like, what its capabilities were, but nobody really knew. Now the Iranians definitely know. And so the ability for us to be able to do this against them later has also been weakened. So I think about that a little bit. Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of good news that comes out of this. The other thing I would say here is that DTRA, the Defense Threats Reduction Agency, does have technical capacity for being able to evaluate these things other than just through human intelligence. And so I think they probably have a pretty good sense now how successful they were. One of the things I got to do towards the end of my time in the military was when I went off to go be like the cruise missile guy for Sixth Fleet, or one of the cruise missile guys for Sixth Fleet, was as I went through targeting school, which was, we talked about this before, about like how you employ weapons in order to achieve certain systems effects. And we didn't talk too heavily about like the GBU-57. We didn't talk too heavily about like DTRA because, that was at a classification level well above certainly what I can talk about here, and definitely kind of the main part of that course. But they got ways. They've got ways, and so another little kind of minor miracle that again we make routine and look easy is the fact that like we can know these things because we've resourced it for generations.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. But you know more about that than me.
Uh, who do you know that's flying B-2s? Like that's kind of a weird little corner of the military.
It really is. A buddy of mine from I didn't go to high school with him, but in that time frame, I was in a program called Civil Air Patrol. That's how I got my start in the military. So I was always enamored with airplanes, and then at some point went to DC and decided I needed to be part of the national defense, and then found this cadet program. And some of those folks that were in that cadet program with me when I was in my teens went off to the Air Force, and a couple of them went to B2s. Now, most of them, my closest friend is actually just retiring out of B2s now. But yeah, he spent most of his career in Missouri.
What a yeah. That's got to be like a family for those folks because like again, it's such a specialized weapon system that
Mm-hmm.
I saw this a little bit when I looked at moving to the Air National Guard as I was leaving active duty and just like how
Oh,
tight those units were because like they stayed together for
yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
And so it must be very similar in the B2 community.
Something to be said for that. This is definitely a tangent, but you know, the U.S. military, the Marine Corps specifically, you spend 3-4 years in a squadron, and then you go off and do something else, and it's up or out, right? There are other militaries, the British in particular, where you get this sort of fork in the road at some point in your career, where you can go on this sort of command path where you eventually will be an operational leader and a general and whatever. And there are some that was like, look, I'm just going to be a tactician. I'm just going to fly this airplane until I'm gray. And that's all I ever want to do. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that because it took me a long time to get to the top of my tactical game, just flying the airplane. And right about the time I got to that point, they yanked me out of the cockpit and told me to go do something else. There's good and bad to that, right? I definitely came back a more well-rounded pilot, but I had to relearn a lot of the tactical skills that are perishable uh and get wasted in some ways.
Yeah. As I knew I wanted to get out of off of active duty, and then my JO tour, I kind of showed up as the junior most guy of a tranche of 11 guys that showed up at about the same time. So I never really had the experience of being the senior JO because I was like, by the time there was 11 other people that were all kind of in that spot that were a little ahead of me. Just my timing, that's the way it worked. So I wanted to leave my it was a pretty good deal instructor tour where I was, teaching young men and women how to fly the F-18. My last year, I was the demo pilot, so I got to do all the air shows across the East Coast, which was just an absolute license to steal. And but I wanted to leave because I wanted to have that JO tour. I wanted to have the Super JO tour. Um, and there was an active war going on. I'd never really participated in it because of the needs of the Navy. I was like, I'm raising my hand, and the Navy wouldn't let me go. I had a couple of CEOs that asked the bureau for me specifically, and the bureau said no. And then because the original reason they said was because it would be not beneficial to his career. And then I said, well, how about this? I'm getting out of the Navy, so whatever, let's go, do our part for God and country here. And they said, no, 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 that would suppress demand out of the training command. I was like, the answer is the same, but the reasons keep changing. The way it was kind of best explained to me for why it's created that way is that it creates strategic resiliency for the military. Is that in the case of a global war, you've got literally thousands of ex-fighter pilots all hanging out doing their own thing, and push comes to shove, we could be like that guy in Independence Day, that gets
Okay.
gets drafted into it. I
Okay, sign me up for that. I'll wait in the wings and go strap on a Hornet anytime.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll see about that. I'd probably just, I'm too old and stupid for that. So, yeah,
I will give you that. I don't think my body would tolerate the physiological challenges of that airplane anymore. I think I would just melt.
yeah, or barf in the bushes behind your speech.
Apparently, yeah, that's fair. Given this last week, that's fair.
Yeah, sure. Well, what do you think about kind of this? intersection between war, tech, and the military. Like, there's a lot going on here, dude.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap your brain around. First, I think, this is why we have allies. Before we go piss off everybody in the world, uh, this is why you need people on your side who are friends. I mean, I'll say it again. I think the face of battle has changed again with the use of UAVs, with the use of drones. And we need to learn as fast as we can, or we're going to be put on the back foot. And this is the place to learn. So let's go learn. The bringing in, I wanted to say deputizing of these senior militaries. I don't get it. I mean, there's no reason they couldn't do what they're being asked to do as advisors to the military. There's no reason to put them on active duty, practically speaking. They're not going to go do anything they couldn't do as a civilian contractor. So I honestly just don't get it, other than what you kind of alluded to, which is that it's sort of a vanity title that they're proud to take somehow. But like it, again, I just don't get it. There's no practical reason.
Yeah, that was my first take at it, which is that like lieutenant colonel too. Like, this is not just a
Right.
They brought him in at like what somebody with 20 years worth of experience.
That's how I retired. I retired as lieutenant colonel.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was an '05 commander in the Navy Reserve, and so same thing. Okay, are they more valuable than I am to the service? Probably, actually. At this point, I don't necessarily say it's just an interesting thing. And so, like, I've been thinking a little bit about this as I saw this news story came across, and like the idea of like, if they're just going to be advisors, why give them the rank, right? Like, the rank means there's like an oath of office associated with this. And in the Navy, for example, we used to have there's this idea of like restricted line versus unrestricted line. And so, for those unfamiliar, the unrestricted line are all the warfighters. Officers that drive ships, SEALs, fly airplanes, etc. And then they have the restricted line. These are officers that are more specialists, right? That aviation maintenance, intelligence, etc. Doctors, JAGs. Those are all kind of within that. And the thing about like the unrestricted line, at least in the way that the Navy operates, is that if the senior most URL unrestricted line officer is the one in kind of like an operational capacity takes charge. So you can be an O2, a lieutenant junior grade, and you can be in charge of, in a kind of a mixed up sort of scenario, you're in charge of potentially an admiral. If that admiral is a restricted line officer. And so there's kind of this component of like, the military needs specialists. They need experts in this thing. And I've always thought that there probably needs to be a more fluid career path where people aren't like out after their first tour, or at their initial commitment, or go all the way to 20, right? Like, we need to have more flexibility in careers where people can go out and get experience and come back, for example. And potentially even having people coming in that have expertise that they earned, like they didn't start in the military, they started somewhere else, but they join at the military and they move a little higher. Lieutenant colonel seems pretty high to me for anybody that's like, this is their first time in the military, so I think that kind of rubs me the wrong way. And then there's this component of like, I say this as a former reservist, right? Which is like, this is more than, sitting around a conference table and giving big ideas. Like, this is like, actually, even the restricted line officers in the Navy, you're putting your ass on the line. Like, are you willing to die for this country? And bluntly, I'm not sure that the CTO of Meta is willing to put his ass on the line for this country. I don't know the guy, but like, I have a suspicion, like, if he hadn't done it before, he's not really willing to do it now.
Maybe I'm just making assumptions there. I guess that's where I went with my comments, is that I don't have the assumption, just an assumption, that that's where these folks are going to serve, that they're going to actually be in harm's way, living in a tent in the desert somewhere, or otherwise contributing to the military mission in a way that a civilian contractor wouldn't. I mean, we have lots of civilian contractors who have key roles in our military operations today. The reason you have a uniformed service is because of uh, chain of command and warfighting capability that leads to deployment on short notice. I mean, all these things that are practical needs of a uniformed military force, not tapping into, like, I get it. I agree. They're probably more valuable to the military at this point than you or I. So tap into that. Great. And I guess I should also say, maybe I should have started with the positive here, which is I love the outside the box thinking. Like, there are better ways to do the way that to design our military force. So maybe I should just go with that. Be like, this is different. Let's just go with the positives that we're thinking about this slightly differently. I just don't, again, I'm just sort of stuck on, like, I don't see the practical need here. I mean, these guys aren't going through boot camp or OCS. They're going to barely know how to wear the uniform. They're not going to contribute to, they haven't had the sort of same sort of leadership training and, they don't understand the military history and what they're entering. Again, all these are assumptions, but if the CTO meta decides to go through all that stuff, hats off to him. I just can't see it. And so I'm making these assumptions, but I just, I get stuck on, there's probably other ways to get this done without giving him a rank for free.
Yeah, I'm low grade insulted, frankly, because like I've known a lot of good people that like have put their ass on the line, and I just don't think these guys, like, if they're not even going to insist, frankly, like, I know people that never served in the military, and if they were called to defend this country, they would step up, right? Good men and women, that are willing to put their ass on the line for this country. And if they were given a similar opportunity, I know that they would probably, almost certainly, insist that they need to go through military training, right? And so it's just like this military cosplay that, like, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But yeah, like, let's think outside of the box. Let's do some different things. But like, you need to be, if you have 4 lieutenant colonels all in one unit, that unit better have like an incredible amount of authority over over like big parts of the military in order to be able to do that, because that's effectively a major command, right? Like, you to have 4 lieutenant colonels in one command means that you need to have at least a colonel running that. That's a major command associated with that has should have a lot of authority. What is going to be their area of responsibility, or are they just going to be conference room warriors that think big thoughts and then go back to their meta day job? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Frankly, if again, you're going to do it. Let's go. Right? Let's actually talk about, like, shaking up the military, taking real talent, putting them through military training, give them a real authority to actually change the fucking system. But this cosplay shit just irritates me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good description of it. It feels like they're going to play military, but are they really? Are they really? I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they're going to go all in and actually do the thing. I doubt it.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. On the other hand, though, let's talk about General Donahue, their U.S. Army Europe, and about, like, you've talked about this on the show before. Is about the idea of that, like, we need to get better at identifying technology, procuring technology, and implementing technology, especially in a combat zone. Um, like, it's been pretty interesting. If anybody that's kind of looked at, like, the development pace of, like, we during the World War II, like in the 40s and the 50s, we generated new airplanes like practically every week, like, designed them. Like, we had dozens of airplanes every decade that were designed, implemented, put into the field, flown. Some of them didn't go as well as others. We coalesced around. It was actually fairly rapid iteration associated with the development of a new technology. Um, and now, like, the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, like, that took decades, trillions. It's a global, platform for countries all over the world. It's just kind of like all over the place, but it took one airplane 20 years to come to market and to deployment. So we got to do better than that. So you kind of I'd love to like explore a little bit about like what you think about like what General Donahue is doing.
Yeah, I really like it. I think to your point about we are learning a ton every day, every week, how this new kind of warfare is going to be fought. And we're at the very early stages of it. In my mind, we're going to experiment with really small drones, with bigger ones, with big ones that deploy small ones. I mean, there's an infinite amount of creativity that's available here. And it's opened up a whole new way of thinking. So to your point, we need to be in this mode of trying a bunch of shit really fast and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't, and building 10 different models a week and then deploying them in real world scenarios and seeing how they do. So I'm fully on board with that approach. And his mission here is let's go talk to the warfighters. Let's go see what they're seeing what's working and what's not. I know that there are parts of the U.S. military that are paying attention to this. I've talked to some folks who are, but man, we're not doing it. And to your point about what the last 50 years of aviation innovation have been, it's about doing. You can't just talk about it. You can't just theorize about it. You got to go do it. So being closely aligned, being in Ukraine and doing some work directly with them enables that.
What are the ways that you think that we can accelerate it? Not just like being in Ukraine and like talking to the warfighters, but like, right now, one of the things that's like kind of shocking but is accepted as a matter of course, is that you pay for a U.S. fighter aircraft by the pound, according to acquisitions folks. The heavier the plane, the more it's like a linear cost associated with that, which is kind of absurd because like a fighter jet weighs far less than like other airplanes, for example, but we pay they cost a lot more. So like per pound is not how you buy airplanes. It's not a bag of rice, right? So that's got to change, right? Like what are your thoughts on like how do we accelerate this? Not just like talking to warfighters, but like the process, the under the covers thing.
Yeah, I think you need big laboratories. This is why Donahue being in Ukraine in some ways, and I know this is crass, but it's a big laboratory. And what I mean by big laboratories is, like, look, that most of the tech, the hardcore, like communication and controls and hardware is available to us. How it's deployed, how it's controlled, what the sensor suite is, what the communication link is. For example, is it just a radio signal or is it GPS or is it line of sight optical or is it something else, right? There's all sorts of combinations. And then it's a matter of the laboratory will allow you to bring some of the existing tech, put it together in unique ways, deploy it together in war game scenarios, because there's drone and then there's anti-drone tech. You've got big firms out there like Epirus who are doing anti-drone work that is electromagnetic pulses. You've got other anti-drones that are doing anti-drone companies that are doing true kinetic fires, like trying to shoot down drones with bullets or missiles, right? Like that's a little nuts when you've got 1,000 drones trying to shoot down each one of them individually seems a little nuts. But like it seems nuts, but it might not be, right? And you won't know it until you put these things force on force, in a big test environment. And that test environment doesn't exist. So for example, if I was Secretary of Defense for a day, that's one of the first things I would do. I would just create a massive drone testing laboratory, meaning like test range where I could go force on force. And like the beautiful thing here is this is not a massively expensive F-35 that I'm going to, have to put up against an F-22. These are like a couple $1,000s each drones, most of them. And you can do a lot of rapid iteration, force on force stuff where you'll learn really quickly and then figure out what works and what doesn't. I actually think, let me go a step further. If we're not doing that soon, or if we're not doing it and I'm just not aware of it, we're behind. Because I guarantee the Chinese are watching this and doing something like that already.
Yeah. the procurement system. One of the things that I think you and I saw when we were flying our jets is that they would update the software, but the software would take 15, or not 15 years, 5 years from conceptualization going through all the tests. And then you're like, so, you know, every military guy likes to joke about like when the people say, like military grade anything, and you're like, oh yeah, okay. Like I know that works in marketing, but like military grade is usually striving for a B. Not there, it's not A grade tech. So yeah, we need to be a lot faster at it, and I think that it's also really important that we need to be a lot more cost effective. We spend $1 trillion on our military right now, and we're having to, the carriers that have been in the Red Sea are having to defend against, $1,000 sort of things, and that's just unsustainable. You will lose that fight eventually just from resources. It doesn't matter that we're the world's wealthiest country. You can't keep that pace of operations up if you're going to be spending that much at a swing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, if you want to dive into the acquisitions process, there's also a lot broken there. And talk about some of the things we could do for out of the box thinking and doing things differently. This is ripe for innovation. So you've got the big primes, the defense primes, the Northrop Grummons and Boeings of the world that are, they've had the same contracts for a long time, that there really isn't a reliable alternative. So the defense just keeps going back to the same primes over and over again. And the markups on those systems are massive, and they're not questioned. They're basically just like cost plus, or you get to carve out the contract however you want and then add profit, and the government just pays it. Some of it's competed, but not really. Some of it's actually competed. But if you want to turn this, and we're trying, if you want to turn the system on its head, you really have to open the door to real competition. So as much as we've done to increase the speed at which we're adopting new technologies, I mean, we're going to put $1 billion into adoption of new tech in the next couple of years. Most of that's still going to go to the primes, unfortunately. There's just going to be a few that get, the top, the 10% is going to go to some new companies like Anduril and Shield AI and other, small upstarts. But that is a system that is prime for turning on its head and finding, like, again, think about if you created that sort of testing area for drones, and you actually did come up with a couple of winners, like you should have the ability as the DoD to just move fast and say, yes, I want those, or I want 1,000 of those. And it's not as easy as that. There's ways in the military today to get small numbers of systems to test with and to experiment with. If you're a special operator, if you're the Navy SEALs, you can get some stuff in a relatively easy fashion. But most of the rest, if you want to generate a program, is a very long, complicated process that, again, the big guys mostly win all of it.
Yeah. I think that's brings us to kind of our next story about like kind of the crashing together of climate and energy tech and defense budgets with the rapid expansion of NATO budgets in Europe. I mean, NATO's kind of taken a page out of the US, which is there's so much stuff that kind of lives under the DoD's budgets that's sometimes defense related, but like DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, I think is what it stands for. Like, if the long kind of very open secret is that like if you can tie any sort of research that you want to do and have some sort of military like angle to it, your best bet is to go through DARPA. It's like the most pure, reliable funding associated with it because it's a sacred cow in the United States. So it's interesting to see that starting to happen there. But I mean, like, speaking of procurement of and climate, one of the places that Heirloom, your company, is working is potentially is about base resiliency for domestic energy production, which was something that they spoke about very explicitly in the article in Bloomberg about like how NATO defense budgets are going. So, I mean, like defense and energy tech are both having a moment and they're coming crashing together. I think it's just a really interesting time.
It really is. Look, the military doesn't care about green energy or renewable anything. The military's job is to be lethal. It's about forced lethality. dominance, winning wars, and protecting troops. And so, the military shouldn't be thinking about anything else. But these two worlds are crashing together because they're interwoven, right? If you have mass climate change, you're going to have mass migration. You're going to have bases that don't function the way they used to, as you said, maybe runways underwater. You're going to have airplanes that don't function. The airplanes actually are designed kind of, you've heard the term edge of the envelope. Look, helicopters are often flying on the edge of the envelope. You do a weight calculation for how much you can lift at what altitude. I was up at the Mountain Warfare Training Center, which is a
Here in Colorado.
training center up in, yeah. And it's high altitude, right? And like the helicopters barely take off at that altitude if they've got troops. Oh, we can't take 10 troops. We can only take 4. And you're like, well, this airplane's rated for 12. What do you mean? And they're like, we need to be able to take off, man. Like I can't take 12. I can't even
Physics.
I can't even take 8. It's just, yeah, right.
It's just physics.
So
the air density is too low to be able to fly when it's too hot.
right. So then, okay, people are like rightly in some ways like, okay, well, the climate change isn't the military's problem. Well, it is if it's 10 degrees warmer everywhere. And the physics of your airplane change everywhere. And so this is what a military planner is worried about is my runway going to be underwater? Is my airplane going to fly in the way that it was designed to fly? And I would say, again, this is a bit of like, I don't know if this is really going to come to pass, but if we truly see an ice age type climate shift, you are going to see people leave where they currently live and try to go somewhere else. And that is a huge national security problem for us. So all of that said, the military should care about this because it's about, if your mission set is to provide for the national defense of America, you've got to be thinking about I used to say, like, my job as a Marine was to worry. Just worry about the worst possible outcomes and be, as the Marine Corps says, be the most ready when the nation is least ready. This is another example of that, where our military planners are rightly thinking about the worst possible outcomes and trying to prepare for it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, they're fighting with one hand behind their back because we have all these language restrictions now that have been placed upon the Fox News host. Somebody referred to him to me the other day as the triple sec of defense. Pete Hegseth, like this schmuck. I think he's just a schmuck. Anyways, but that's been placed on the military is the idea that you're not allowed to talk about certain things. And I wrote a paper. I submitted it to Proceedings a little while back. They didn't pick it up, but it was about like climate change is like the greatest like threat multiplier that the U.S. has ever faced, and we aren't still internalizing it. And so military planners are trying to work at it because it hits like at every level. It hits at the tactical level, whether your plane can fly, whether the runway is flooded out, et cetera. The operational, whether that base is going to be, functional, period, because of buckling runways or flooding. Like the largest Navy base in the world is Norfolk Naval Station, and it won't survive rising seas, combined with its local geology that's causing it to sink anyways. That's a big problem for the U.S. But then it goes to the strategic, and frankly, even grand strategy, like the level above strategy. So grand strategy was the American grand strategy for a generation was containment. About how do we contain the Soviet Union? And the paper that I wrote was that I think that the U.S. needs a new grand strategy. I called it acclimatization, which is about to change to this world that we're entering. As part of the research for that paper is that one of the things I came to realize is, did you know that there are more displaced people in the world now than ever in human history? You don't know that because most of them are internally displaced, right? Like they have to move from one place to another in their country because of that. But that puts a lot of stress on nation states. You're seeing a lot of people moving into urban areas where we have become more fragile countries. There comes a point when the nation state can no longer adapt to all the stresses that are put upon it, and you have failed states. That's Afghanistan, Somalia, parts of Pakistan, effectively.
Sudan.
You got it. And what happens to those people when they start moving all over the place? What happens to those failed states when they're nuclear armed? To bring it back to Iran, right? Iran's heating up pretty quickly, for example. What happens when you have failed nuclear states? that starts getting scary. We dealt with that once when we had a mature and responsible government back in the in the late 80s, early 90s that was willing to deal with a collapsing nuclear opponent. I don't have faith in the triple sec to be able to do this. If it was his time, to be called. We are in a very fragile and delicate situation.
Wait, the triple sec?
The triple sec of defense. It's because the guy.
Got it. Got it. You might have to explain that, but I get it.
Yeah, so the pun is triple sec is a type of alcohol. The Secretary of Defense is often referred to as SecDef. Anyways, maybe a little over the heads, but
and the SecDef has a alcohol history.
It's obvious to anybody that looks at them.
I think, yeah. Anyway, keep going. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is what happens when you put clowns in charge of things. You get a circus. Anyways, moving away from my antipathy to that guy is that the idea that we aren't building a strategy for this, and I'm glad to see that at least the Europeans, and let's call a spade, they have been underfunding defense for far too long, too comfortable under the American blanket of security that we provided because of our grand strategy around containment previously, that was focused on containing the Soviet Union and being essentially their security blanket. I'm glad that as they're emerging from that, they're creating their own grand strategies. That there's a component of climate that's a massive bit about this, which is that they need to have the resiliency not only for the changing climate of their countries, but for the changing climate of their countries elsewhere in the world that is going to start causing collapse of some of these nation states. And so I'm really stoked to see that. And I hope, that's actually business for Heirloom, frankly, because you are a great example of what base resiliency could look like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a huge part of why we do what we do. But oh my gosh, what you just painted is, I feel like I gotta go back to work right now.
Yeah, my when I onboard new staff, or including our interns, I have I have run everybody through company culture and about expectations for behavior, just kind of a standard thing I do. I think that came out of my time in the mill. But also I run them through why the company exists, what's our vision and mission, and then specifically about how I see climate as a big fucking threat to our future. Yeah. And I've got this, my staff lovingly refers to it as my doom and gloom presentation, where I present this speech about fatal heat in India, and they go oh my God. It helps to get, all the oars in the water and everybody pull in the right direction here at the Acclimate side of things. So.
Right on.
Well, speaking of the government being in some disarray here, the Supreme Court news, kind of just to react to that. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's another blow, man. I think it's not that surprising, and I'm not a legal expert. I'm going to have to, defer a little bit of my judgment here to, this came out today, and I'm going to want to do a bit more research and understand what this really means. But I think what's clear is that this is going to end up being more power to the executive. If the president can write an executive order and a court in current form could just put an injunction, put a stop to it until further legal review. I mean, that feels like a good thing, right? I feel like it's always frustrating when things move slow, but slow is good when it comes to national policy and disrupting government services or impacting people's rights. Slow is good in that regard. And, slow isn't decades. Slow is 6 months, couple years. That feels like the right kind of balance. And what this does, at least I think practically speaking, is it's going to make challenging presidential orders and things that presidential orders way harder, because you're not going to have one judge be able to put an injunction on the implementation of a certain order. You're going to have that same thing done in many places, and it's going to make judicial review all the harder. That feels like the wrong direction. I think the president already has enough power. I think we were formed as a country on the premise that we didn't want to have a single monarch that had all the power. We wanted multiple branches of government to provide checks and balances. And this is taking away some of those checks and balances. And I think not for the better.
Yeah, no, the framers were definitely concerned about the power of one individual that could have over a government. I mean, it's why the presidency itself is not the Article 1, but Article 2 within the Constitution. It's supposed to come after the legislative branch. Congress has largely abdicated its authority. The one check that was on executive power, and to be clear, like executive power had been growing for decades.
Yeah.
And
under both parties, right? This has been a long-term trend. I get that.
100%. But it is, the guardrails are continuing to be taken off. So there's this Supreme Court ruling, and there was also a previous court ruling that doesn't allow you to sue the president for anything, as long as he could make a realistic claim that he was doing it under, his official title. So, the worry that we have here for a lot of people, just to paint a very clear picture about where we are now, is that we currently have ICE agents that are moving around the country that are not identified as ICE agents. They're masking their faces. They're not providing warrants. They're taking people off of the streets. They cannot be stopped now by injunction. So that individual that now is taken off by the street, including we've had American citizens and people here on green cards and people that are being nabbed coming out of a citizenship hearing. Like that's a real thing that's happening right now. So that's a civil liberty. And you may think that your citizenship protects you, but that doesn't anymore, because now you have to be able to sue. But frankly, your family has to know that you got nabbed. And they have to have the resources to be able to go sue. And if they do that and the court finds that, like, yes, you were wrongfully detained, they can only free you. They can't free anybody else, because that's my understanding of how this is, of what this ruling is looking like. And so we've already seen that the administration is unwilling, when they wrongfully detain somebody and traffic them out of the country to a third country that they've never been to before, into a human rights abuse prison in Central America, that they claim that they can't get them back now. Like, this is some really dangerous and scary shit. And I don't want to call for violence by any stretch, right? So I want to make that very clear. Violence is not the correct answer here, but I do question all the people that shouted about the Second Amendment for years and years and years about how that's the only thing that prevents the government from doing it. I don't see any of them even using their voice, right? And that I want them to start speaking up. Leave the gun at home, but God damn it, get in public and use your voice, because this is what you said you told me you believed in, and I want to see it.
Yeah, I hate to say it, man, but I feel like there's so much tribalism here that that's not going to happen.
Oh, I know it's not.
And I'll give you a couple of examples, just personal examples where, I used to have this argument about the Second Amendment with a lot of folks. And I respected their perspective. Like, my opinion is that, I have a shotgun. I have several handguns. I call it my elephant gun, a big Marlin 30-30, I'm a gun owner. I love to shoot. That shotgun is not because I love to shoot. It is home protection. Like, no joke. But I've played that out in my mind. I'm not a prepper per se, but like, I looked at Katrina. By the way, I was in Iraq during Katrina, but like, I looked at the images of Katrina, and in my mind, when I started having kids, I wanted to be able to protect the homestead. Like, I am in no way anti-Second Amendment, but I would have these discussions with people, family and friends, about, like, why do you need an assault weapon? Like, you don't need an automatic weapon, do you? Like, well, the government's going to come for me. And like, I'm like, dude, the government has tanks and big bombs. Like, you're not going to fight off the government with your, like, what I'm preparing for is, like, government services go down for a week or two. I need to protect my homestead because people are looting. Like, that to me, everybody's got their own threshold for this, but to me, that's a reasonable amount of, like, I'm going to protect my family. everybody should do whatever they think is right on that front. But dude, you're not going to beat the government. Like, just let's be real about this.
We just dropped 30,000-pound bombs on the other side of the planet. Like, like we performed like martial miracles. Like, no, you're not going to go against the military. And by the way, are you internalizing the idea that you're going to have to shoot American soldiers? Like when you're fantasizing about like going after the government, you're going to shoot cops. That's who you're going to shoot. Like in your mind when you're thinking about this, you jerk off. Like, stop it.
But like this conversation always went to, but I don't want the government knowing I have these things. Right. That's where I was going. That's why I'm talking about it now. It's like that Second Amendment conversation is long and deep. And there are respectable positions on all sides of that. I get it. I understand that it comes from a place of like wanting to protect yourself and your liberty. But here's the thing. Here's the problem with where we are today is that those same people who are saying, I don't want to be on a gun registry because that's the government knowing too much about me. I'm not kidding you. In the last month and a half, I've had a couple of people tell me that, one, why don't we just have the government should just know who everybody is so we don't have fake voting. Like everybody should just register as if you have a driver's license, you need an ID to vote. And if you don't have an ID, you can't vote because the government should just know all of our stuff. And how about this? Instead of a driver's license, we just do it all by biometric. I actually had somebody make this assertion. Let's just use our fingerprint or our eyeball scan to vote. And I'm like, hold on.
Harry Goldwater's like rolling over in his grave.
You're the guy who like 6 months ago was arguing that you didn't want to have your name on a gun registry. And now you want the government to have your biometric data? Like that doesn't make any sense. Now,
you're okay with a retina scan, but not
like holy fuck. No, I don't want the government to have that. Not in a million years. But by the way, they have my DNA because I was in the military. So fine. Like I've given up, but that's because I served. I think as a general rule, the government should not have everybody's DNA, everybody's retina scan. That to me is a clear indicator of government overreach. The second one was recently somebody said, we should just have like an ID check law. Like no problem. Like if the police officer wants to stop you walking down the street, you should just flash your ID and keep moving. I'm like, dude, again, like what was this country founded on? The country was founded on the idea of civil liberties first. The government is there to serve us, not the other way around. And you've got this backwards in your mind. If you think it's like the starting point here should be, you have to have permission to walk down the street. Fuck that. I'm going to walk down the street if I want. And the government should have to have a burden to stop me from doing it. That burden needs to be some suspicion, reasonable suspicion, and I don't have the right legal language here, but reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime or done something wrong. So don't invert this. Don't make this about me having to prove something to the government. Make this about the government having to prove something to me because this is my fucking home. And sorry, I'm getting wound up here, but how we got to this place is tribalism. It is that now I'm right and you're wrong. And last week I was arguing about Second Amendment and not being on gun registries. And now I got to support what's happening because I don't want immigration to happen the way it's happening. And so I'm okay with weird contortions of my own belief system because it's my tribe.
Yeah, 100%. When I was a kid, my mom one time described it, and my mom's she knows her shit. She's super prescient about this, which is the idea is that like most people have an emotion that drives a decision and then use their intelligence to back up the emotion rather than like, frankly, if you are a person that has, and that's what tribalism is, right? Frankly, right. Which is this feels right. Like, fuck those guys. My guys are the good people. They're the bad people. But like, frankly, that's not how ethics works. And you either have ethics that inform the way you make your decisions or you don't. And if you're letting tribalism drive it, then you don't have ethics. That's just, and like, I mean, it's a harsh thing to say, but, and like, there's a lot of people that I know that are very pleasant to me, like, but like it's hard because like, they're nice to me and they would be, someone would literally give me the shirt off their back, but they're like unethical people. And it's a really weird juxtaposition to frankly, only my faith helps me to work around, which is the idea of like we're all fallen, we're all human, we're all subject to our simian ancestry, and like sometimes people just make decisions because of the hindbrain instead of the forebrained, and our world is so hacked by frankly the CTO of Facebook that that like that like most of us are really prone to making hindbrain decisions now.
Yeah. I'm more generous on that front. I think I have so many family and friends who are stuck in this alternate universe of news that I give them a lot of grace. But it doesn't mean that I don't get fired up. Obviously, I just got pretty fired up. But I will say, I don't think that they've thought it through. To your point, I don't think they lack an ethics or a compass. I just don't think they've really thought through the meaning behind what I just described, which is it's not me asking permission to walk down the street. I don't think they've made that connection in their brain. I think they've just said, well, practically, I don't mind if a cop asks me for my ID. It's easy for me to just whip it out and show him my ID. That's easy. I just, I'm hoping that before we get past the no return, the point of no return, that we can connect these dots. That mindset came from a place in time. It was a few hundred years ago. I get that, but we cannot. I hope to God we don't get back to a place in America where it's the government's land and I have to ask permission to walk on it.
Yeah. Just to be very clear, what drove this whole thing was people wanted to end birthright citizenship. And so, whatever your opinion of it is, what the Constitution says, according to Amendment 14, is that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which means is that they're subject to the laws of the land that they're on, which is what the rule of law is about, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, according to the rule of the Supreme Court, and to your fear, you have to kind of prove that. Because the government right now is doing some things that are illegal. You're going to have to sue them to prove it associated with it. If they do this en masse against everybody, you can't even sue the president or any of the officers of the government that were doing this, even though they knew it was probably breaking the law. So we're in some really interesting, and I think the 21st century is relying upon like what's happening in the next 3 to 4 years. Like, I think we're really kind of at a massive inflection point, and we're going to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. This is also tribalism, right? People are not worried about this lack of due process. And I don't get it. All my buddies for the last 20 years were focused on the government not infringing, small government was their mantra. Like, I wasn't pro big government by any stretch, but now, handing more power to the government is totally fine. We can trust the government now because they're only going to deport the bad guys.
All evidence to the contrary. Let's get into our good, bads, and others as we kind of wrap up the show. Neal, tell me what's going on good.
Good. All right. So I mentor a high school age student through a foundation called the Dragon Kim Foundation, founded by a fellow named Daniel Kim. So Dragon Kim Foundation funds projects for high school age students to go do community service in their community. I got paired up with a guy named Apollo. And first of all, cool for us first name. Awesome first name. And secondly, he just has this like amazing idea of going to collect fruit from trees that would otherwise just fall to the ground and rot, picking the fruit off the trees and delivering it to hungry people. And like, he didn't invent this. There's actually programs in Southern California that like do this, but he has organized a whole cohort of his high school buddies to do this. And I showed up last week to one of his programs, and there were like 25 people there, and hundreds of pounds of fruit were delivered to hungry people. It's just like a good moment where the community comes together, and this young man, 16 years old, is just doing good in his community. And I just love to see it.
Yeah, man. Like the old environmentalist maxim of think globally but act locally, like applies here. Like, you can get all worked up about what's going on at the Supreme Court and what's happening in defense and all the rest of it, but like, just do the thing in your local area and build that example for everybody else. It's a little bit more noble than what I used to do, which was just take the fruit off of trees when I was stationed in Italy. Because, like, again, like, it's all going to go to waste. Lindsay was always a gasp. I was like, man, they don't care. Like, a matter of fact, there's a cherry tree. There's 4 cherry trees that are about a block from my house. that produce a ton of pie chairs. And every year I go over there, and every year Lindsay's a little uncomfortable, but like I've talked to those folks, they know that I'm coming. And I just bring my step ladder, so I'm picking all the cherries that aren't easy to get, and, and I make a couple of pies out of the deal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. My bad is, look, I don't know how else to say it. Like I don't have a lot of friends that are undocumented, but I have a few, and they're staying home. Um, no joke. Like, I don't know what the economic impact here is going to be, but there are a lot of folks. Actually, I shouldn't even just say undocumented. There are some that are undocumented. There's just a couple of those that I know, but there are even more that just look brown and are worried about getting picked up. And they're like, I go to work and I go get food, and that's it. I do not go out otherwise. It's almost like COVID for them. They're just staying home. A parent that I know is keeping their kids home because they're terrified if they go out that they're going to get nabbed up by ICE. I go back to, who do we want to be? I get that we want secure borders. I support having a secure border and having a pathway to legal immigration. But I also just like, these are actually real people that are just trying to live their lives, and seeing this up close and personal for me is really hard. And it's not just in California. There are some folks in the Midwest that I know they're doing the same thing. They're just terrified for their kids to go outside.
Immigration's been something I've worked with. I've sponsored a couple of Afghan families. A lot of the Afghans that helped us during the war are no longer allowed in the United States. That's this country has kind of lost its way in so many ways, and we're allowing people that we knew they were lying to us about like what their intentions were, that it was about like legal immigration. We knew that they were lying to us. We accepted the lies, and now they're in power, and they don't feel like they need to lie anymore. And so we collectively are experiencing that, but more acutely, the people that like are afraid for their families are experiencing it acutely. And so like my heart goes out for them. A lot of these people care more about America than a lot of Americans I know. And like this, we shouldn't be doing this to them.
Yeah. Yeah. On that point, and let me give you a little bit of encouragement. I mean, clearly I'm in the middle of the road, right? I hang out with folks that are lefty and folks that are way right. This last week, some of my very right-leaning friends were like, this is inhumane. These are real people that just got stuck in the system. And look, they're the ones that are screaming for border security and making sure that we have a legal pathway to citizenship. And then the very next, and this surprised the crap out of me. I give them a lot of credit for this. Their very next statement was, but these are real people that are just trying to live their lives. And like, this is my bad. Maybe it should have been my good, because this is like a sign that maybe there's light at the end of this tunnel. Because these are super conservative people that I often argue with about, sort of them being too far right. And they were very, I think, human about this specific topic. So,
I mean, I hope so.
a glimmer of hope.
I hope so. The question is what are they going to do? In the first Trump administration, when immigration was kind of not quite at the rolling boil that it was, but it was, the heat was massively turned up. There's an ICE detention facility here in Denver, the Denver area in Aurora, and I started taking members of my church out there in order to go visit with detainees. The Christian faith calls you to visit with both the immigrant and also with the prisoner. And so we ended up bringing about 60 people out there, and it's a full prison experience. Like, you walk through the door, you have to show them your ID, you go through a metal detector that you can't bring certain things in. They walk you through, and you go to sitting on a metal stool that's bolted to the floor to talk on a phone through reinforced glass to somebody else. And most of the people that we ended up talking to were people that had not broken any laws at all. They were one particular immigrant. he was a Cameroonian man who had suffered at the hands of his government torture, and was pretty much told like leave or we're going to kill you. So he got the message and he left, and he believed in America, and so he worked his way across, got a plane to South America, literally walked from Colombia to the United States, including through the Darien Gap, which was so horrific that like he was crying about the abuses that he had experienced in there. Presented himself for asylum, a legitimate case of asylum, because again he'd been tortured and threatened upon his life, at the U.S. border at a port of entry. We threw him in prison, and so that was. And one of the things I came to realize is that like our immigration system's been very broken for a very long time, because this is not explicitly limited to just when Trump's president. Like we do things like this all the time. And so like it made me concerned about that. But also the other thing I saw when I brought all these people from my church to go seeing this is like they were all traumatized. They had all kind of had that experience. And frankly, this was the act locally part for me, is like, how can we change hearts and minds? Is like, I need to change the people near me, that I can change their opinions. And it's not going to be through me preaching. It's going to be through me showing. Some of them started acting. So most of them did not. Most of them just like felt like that they had done their duty for immigration, and by just going in and observing that somebody was being abused. So I deeply, deeply hope, and I'm speaking this into the universe because we're on a podcast, that the people that I know that I think that are decent people and would literally give me the shirt off their back, that they do something about this, that they care more than feeling bad.
Mm-hmm. It's not enough just to feel bad.
Yeah. Sorry, rant over. I've been ranting
That's
a little
right.
bit today,
No,
man.
all good. All right, my other is a bit of hypocrisy. I bought a Starlink.
Did you really?
I did.
I mean, at its core, it's a great product.
This is the thing, right? That's right. I've been very clear that I am a huge admirer of Elon on the tech front. Like I just did, PayPal, SpaceX, Starlink, Tesla, and I'm missing one. You go down the list, he's just done amazing things, and there's nothing like Starlink anywhere. And I'm going to go on vacation next week, and it's going to be in a remote place. And I'm just thinking about my family. I'm just thinking about my job as a man, in part, is just to protect my clan. I'm like, well, if I'm going to be out of cell range, there's only one product on the market that can address that. I'd like to have, if something goes wrong, I'd like to have the ability to contact the outside world. And so I just did it. And look, I stand behind my comments before that, Elon's going to be remembered for killing USAID and therefore being responsible for likely the deaths of millions of people. And that legacy is going to follow him around. At the same time, I can appreciate the tech and use what's available to me. So look, it was not without some confliction, but I did it.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's without conflict to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, first of all, we all have to realize that we live within the world that we live in, and you have to do the best that you can within that world, and that means that there is no such thing as a perfect choice, or rarely there's a perfect choice. And so you had to do what you have to do. I would also say Starlink is suffering from the Elon brand. Money is going to some of its competitors. Competition, as somebody that engages in capitalism, is generally good for the consumer, right? So hopefully, the Kuipers of the world and what are some of the other ones? Hopefully they get their act together and they start actually competing with Starlink. So you have more options and you can look at Starlink versus Kuiper and be like, yeah, screw that guy. I'm going to go with Kuiper. But they're not.
Kuiper launched their first couple of batches, 30 at a time. I think they've done 2 launches now with the EULA, which is the Boeing. It's like the conglomerate of the old rocket conglomerate. I assume, I don't know, but I assume those are like test runs because they need to get like 3,000 of these systems launched to compete with Starlink. But that they're launching any means that hopefully they're not too far behind.
Yeah, it's coming. probably just like he did with Tesla, is he took his eye off the ball and he's allowing competition to catch up. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But more competition for consumers is
Yeah.
generally better.
Yeah.
For my goods, bads, and others, today I'm getting my son home from camp, and I'm pretty excited about that. He went on this
Nice.
he went on this river rafting camp. So they have these really cool Avid for Adventure. Full disclosure, they're actually a customer of Acclimates, even, but I came to this camp
Cool.
separately. That does these really cool outdoor camps, rock climbing camps, or river rafting camps, or backpacking camps, etc. And so, like, dude gets to live the Colorado lifestyle, and I'm a little jealous. So
That's awesome.
it's a river rafting camp, so it wouldn't be as bad as another one because he'll have at least been in the water. But I don't think he's changed clothes the whole time, is my guess. So we'll see how that goes. My bad is the head of the U.S. Counterterrorism Office is a 22-year-old man named Thomas Fugati. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Has exactly zero experience in the field. Graduated college last year. He may be some sort of like prodigy in this, but I kind of doubt it. So I guess Big Balls wasn't available to fill the role, but doing it all of his Doge foolsness. Not to say that the government doesn't need new blood, but Jesus, it'd be nice if like the guy had at least like taken a course in the material.
Something. Oh my gosh.
And yeah, my other, and we've been at it kind of here at length is that like, what are Americans going to do? Things are changing. Hearts and minds need to change a little bit faster than they are right now because the news events are happening quickly. So I'm keeping my eye on that. I want to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a moment, as I say, a time for choosing. I don't think most people really see the severity of the time we're in. To be honest, I think things are going okay. They're worried about the price of eggs and groceries, as they should be. We'll see if their pocketbooks are impacted, if then they start paying attention. We'll see if their neighbors or, I don't know, the folks who work in their neighborhoods are impacted if they start paying attention. That's what happened, I think, to my conservative friends I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that it hit home. It actually impacted their local lives. And then they saw the humanity up front. Sort of like, gay marriage was so unpopular until people started realizing that, like, oh, wait, my sister's gay and my cousin's gay. And like, oh, those people aren't the Antichrist. So when it becomes more personal and gets easier, I don't get the sense that that's happening in a broad way. It's like it's happening over there to other people. So maybe when it's closer to home, people start paying closer attention.
Yeah, we'll see. Weirdly, I'm still optimistic. One of the things I really believe is that we have to rebuild the United States for the 21st century. There's no reason this can't be the second American century. Just like the 20th century was the first, but we've allowed all the infrastructure to get really ass rickety. And right now, we have an arsonist that's burning it all down rather than rebuilding it. But maybe there'll be an opportunity on the back end of this. Hopefully it doesn't involve too much pain to us as individuals, and more importantly, too much pain to the people that aren't you, that you should care about before, it's your neighbor that's getting nabbed. We'll see. Hopefully everybody wakes up. But I am optimistic. I do think this could be the next, the second American century. But we got to get our shit together in a hurry.
Yeah, 100%.
That's all we got, Neal.
All right, that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, share it on social media or send it to someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Garoso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you next week.